Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your time today. I'm always glad to see important bodies such as yours take up topics related to animal issues. They're often really complex and emotional because, according to the law, animals are property, while on the other hand, many people feel pets are more like family members, and that can make these hot button issues. My name is Mike Fry. I've worked in the field of animal sheltering for more than 20 years. My family founded Minnesota's first and largest no-kill animal shelter, which I ran personally for 15 years. I've worked and consulted with animal shelters across the United States, including some in New Jersey, where I have family ties. It's a sad fact that people commit animal cruelty. It's also a sad fact that people are sometimes improperly charged with animal cruelty. We basically have an imperfect system enforcing imperfect laws, which is why adhering strictly to the U.S. Constitution is important. That Constitution specifically prohibits the taking of property from people without due process of law, which is, unfortunately, exactly what will occur if these proposed changes are enacted. That's not just my opinion. That question has been asked and answered in our nation's court system. In the documents I sent to committee members in advance of this hearing, I referenced one such case, Louisville Kennel Club versus Louisville Jefferson County Metro Government. In that case, the U.S. District Court examined a similar law. In that decision, the court wrote, quote, "The scheme set up in the statute, if such a person was unable to put up the fee immediately upon the probable cause finding, his pet is forfeit and he has no apparent recourse for its recovery, even if he's ultimately found innocent of the underlying charge. There is thus a high risk of enormous deprivation, which some sort of additional hearing, appeal, or late payment process could remedy." End quote. The court then concluded, quote, "Consequently, we must hold that the portion of the statute that would permanently deprive a pet owner of his property absent a finding of guilt is unconstitutional." End quote. Like the nullified law in that decision, the proposed changes in this bill will require people simply accused of violating the law to pay upfront costs of care for animals. This will force people who cannot afford these fees to forfeit their animals before due process has occurred. In some ways, the proposed changes you were considering today are worse than the law that was thrown out in Louisville. That law imposed a set fine of $450. The proposed changes in this bill set an entirely ambiguous and undefined fee. It refers only to reasonable fees without saying what that even means. As a side note, that would likely void this law under the void for vagueness doctrine of the U.S. Constitution. And again, that's not just my opinion. I mean, what is reasonable? Who gets to decide? The people collecting the money? Really? I mean, come on. Furthermore, if these changes became law, these pets taken from families will be put into an animal sheltering system that I and many New Jersey residents believe to be badly broken. State inspection reports for New Jersey animal shelters show that it's not uncommon for the shelters themselves to be in violation of your own animal cruelty laws. Additionally, many of the very shelters pushing for these changes have shockingly high kill rates. And while they often try to blame the boogeyman of pet overpopulation for the killing that they themselves are doing, they actually have lower intake rates than open admission animal shelters in other states that have actually already stopped killing years ago. These proposed changes will, without a doubt, result in some pets being taken away from families and killed before your court system ultimately finds those families not guilty. That, of course, will be an overt violation of the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits the taking of property without due process. And again, that is a question that has been asked and answered in our court system already. Furthermore, if you look at the finances of the organizations pushing for these changes, it's clear that they don't even need the payment for these costs before any sort of adjudication has occurred. It's not as though these organizations are living month to month, paycheck to paycheck. In spite of the general public perception that animal shelters need money constantly, they frequently have hefty bank accounts and pay their executives enormous salaries into the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. Furthermore, one of the dirty secrets of the animal sheltering industry is that animal cruelty cases are, you might call, the cash cows of these agencies. They provide the best marketing, public relations, and fundraising of any of the other situations they handle, because almost nothing can get donors to open their pocketbooks like the sensational news stories that surround these cruelty cases. Therefore, these proposed changes will undoubtedly create enormous problems trying to solve an issue that doesn't even really exist. There's another stunning irony here that I can't help but point out. The very organizations pushing for these changes to give themselves more power and money in these cases have come before this very assembly previously to vehemently oppose proposed common sense regulations that would increase their own accountability and transparency. Regulations that have been implemented elsewhere and that almost immediately end the needless killing in animal shelters that many advocates in New Jersey have referred to as the assembly line of death that these shelters too often are. I urge you to vote no for the Constitution, for the sake of the animals, and for the families who love them. Thank you for hearing.